All right, so there's some special cases when it comes to factoring. The first one is difference of squares. So this is where there's only two terms, both are perfect squares, and the sign of the middle term is subtraction. So these examples here, x squared minus 81, y squared minus 64, 4x squared minus 25y squared, a squared, b squared minus c squared, all of those are perfect squares that have been subtracted from each other. So to factor these, you set up your parentheses, you put the square root of the terms in both the parentheses. You put a plus in one and a minus in the other. So what that looks like is you have your x squared minus 81. So you put an x and an x, a 9 and a 9, because the square root of x squared, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 81 is 9. And then a plus in one and a minus in the other, and you're done. So this one's broken down even further. I set up my two sets of parentheses, a y, an 8 and an 8, and then a plus in one and a minus in the other. 4x squared minus 25y squared. The square root of 4x squared is 2x. The square root of 25y squared is 5y. I put that in both sets of parentheses, a plus in one and a minus in the other. It doesn't matter if you put the subtraction first or the addition first. Either one, doesn't matter. A squared b squared, square root is just ab. C squared d squared, the square root is just cd. Plus in one and a minus in the other. So special note here, this cannot be done if either one of the two terms is not a perfect square. They have to be perfect squares to make this work. It also doesn't work if the sign in the middle is a positive or a plus sign. It has to be subtraction. The other kind of special cases is perfect square trinomials. All right, so when a trinomial is a perfect square, the first term's a perfect square, the last term's a perfect square, and the middle term is 2 times the square roots of those terms multiplied together. For example, x squared plus 6x plus 9. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of x squared is x. 3 times x is 3x times 2 is 6x. This is what we were doing when we got it to here, when we were going to vertex form. When we got it to here, and we said our shortcut is just to put half of the number in here. And then we would take that number and subtract it off the end. The reason is because you were technically putting in this plus 9 inside the parentheses, so you were subtracting off a 9 at the outside of the parentheses, if you can think back to completing the square. If not, what you need to look for is does the square root of this number happen to be half of the number in the middle? Square root of 16 is 4. That happens to be half of 8. So it works out that x minus 4 squared is this factored. Factors into x minus 4 times x minus 4. Now, instead of trying to remember another method, I'm perfectly fine with you looking at these problems and saying, I just want to ask myself what two numbers multiply to give me 16 but would add up to give me negative 8. So instead of having to figure out another thing to remember. So if we go back to the examples, we have here x squared plus 6x plus 9. The two numbers that multiply to give me 9, that add to give me 6, are positive 3 and positive 3. So once we get to this part, if you find yourself writing the exact same thing twice, you just write it as x plus 3 squared. Okay? The two numbers that multiply to give me 16 but add up to give me negative 8 is x minus 4, x minus 4. So when I have it written twice, it's just x minus 4 squared. The next one you would have to go through borrowing. So you would have to borrow the 4 down, and get x squared plus 20x plus 100. The two numbers that multiply to give me 100 but add up to give me 20 would be 10 and 10. So x plus 10 is how that would factor, but now we've got to give that 4 back. 4 actually doesn't divide out of 10, but a 2 will divide into that 10, leaving you with a 2 up front, and a 2 will divide into this 10, leaving you with a 2 up front. So I'm breaking up that 4 into 2 separate pieces, and so it would be 2x plus 5 and 2x plus 5. Again, I've written the same thing twice, so I put a squared.